Trump is trying to do something which is not new, which is as old as the hills, which Julius Caesar did, and he's not doing it terribly well, actually. His foreign policy has long been guided, or if 4 years is a long time, by a zero sum worldview, by this transactional worldview, where alliances are liabilities and dominance is secured through division. And his latest pivot, decoupling from Europe and repositioning the United States towards Russia, is an attempt to reset global power dynamics. But despite this audacious plan, his strategy is unlikely to succeed. The very forces Trump seeks to manipulate, European resolve, Russian ambitions, and global reality, will ultimately undermine his attempt to divide and rule. It can't work. Europe is not, among other things, the pliant pawn that Trump wishes to move around on his chessboard. Trump and his team, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, have made it clear Europe should take responsibility for its own security. The problem, Europe and NATO have already been moving in that direction since Trump's first term. European nations have steadily increased their defense budgets, not because they were cajoled into that by Washington, but in response to Russia's aggression. And by attempting to abandon Europe, Trump is not fostering division, he's catalyzing deeper European unity. And Trump's Secretary General, Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, other European leaders like Donald Tusk, have responded to US disengagement not with capitulation but with greater militarization. If Trump's goal is to weaken European resolve, he is miscalculated. The continent is accelerating its defense efforts, not retreating. Trump's belief that he can broker a deal with Vladimir Putin by recognizing Russian territorial gains is based on flawed assumptions. Moscow's demands exceed. They extend far beyond Crimea and Donetsk. They include dismantling Ukraine's sovereignty, ensuring NATO's strategic retreat. And Trump's attempts to decouple the US from European security while simultaneously engaging Russia diplomatically is contradictory. Russia's views on Western presence, whether led by NATO or independent European forces, Russia sees any Western presence as a provocation. Moreover, the idea that Trump can pressure Ukraine into accepting territorial losses is politically untenable. No Ukrainian government, especially one led by Zelensky, can concede such terms without facing national upheaval. And a US brokered deal that excludes Ukraine from the negotiating table will collapse upon arrival. So rather than pushing Europe into a submissive role, Trump's disengagement is forcing EU and NATO countries to take a more aggressive stance. And leaders in Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia, historically all wary of Russian influence, are advocating for unprecedented military spending. Britain has pledged an additional £3 billion in annual military aid to Ukraine, and the European Commission has placed Baltic and Eastern European hawks in key security roles. Instead of fragmenting NATO, Trump's pivot is emboldening the very countries he hoped to sideline, just as Putin's activities have actually expanded NATO. Trump's rhetoric suggests he welcomes a world of competing powers, China, Russia, the US, each acting in its own self-interest. But in practice, a weakened America does not mean an empowered Trump. A multipolar world favors strong, cohesive alliances, something Trump's foreign policy actually undermines. In such a landscape, China benefits the most, consolidating its influence in Eurasia, while the US alienates its traditional allies. Meanwhile, Russia is unlikely to align with Washington beyond short-term tactical gains. Its long-term strategy involves deepening ties with Beijing, not trusting an erratic US president. Trump's global shifts rest on the assumption that his policies will be implemented without major resistance, but his own administration is divided on these issues. While his closest allies such as J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are carrying out his vision, the broader US foreign policy establishment, including Congress, the Pentagon, and intelligence agencies, are skeptical. If Trump's plan to realign the world order faces significant pushback from within his own government and his own country, it becomes even less viable. Trump's approach to divide and rule, abandoning Europe, cozying up to Russia, and reasserting US dominance through selective engagement, is fundamentally flawed. Instead of fracturing alliances, he's reinforcing European unity. Instead of drawing Russia closer, he's playing into Moscow's hands. And instead of securing American global leadership, he's weakening it. The reality is that global power doesn't function like a reality TV theatrical spectacle. It requires consistency, credibility, and strategic depth, all of which Trump's plan lacks. Trump succeeded in reality TV because he had a producer behind him. There is no producer in global politics. The world is moving beyond America's unipolar dominance, but Trump's attempt to dictate this transition will fail under the weight of his own contradictions.